Welcome to What the Plus, an overview of the last century of pop culture as filtered through Disney Plus. I'm Garrett Martin. I'm your host. I'm a writer. I'm an editor. I work at Paste Magazine. And this is the show where every episode I get a guest on. They pick one show or movie from Disney Plus. We watch it. We talk about it. We discuss how it holds up today versus when it was made. We talk about what they couldn't do today that they apparently thought was appropriate in the past. And we try to find at least some bit of meaning within the pop culture that has meant so much to this world that we live in today. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys are doing well. Today's guest, he is a very funny comedian and a writer. A guy I first met a few years ago when he did a live set at the Paste Studio in New York. Back when Paste had a studio in New York. His name's Brett Davis. You might know him from The Special Without Brett Davis, the New York public access comedy show that he hosted for 4 years that took over the old Chris Gethard show time slot. You've also maybe heard him as Anderson Cooper on Showtime's Our Cartoon President. He was one of the writers and performers in last year's revival of the National Lampoon Radio Hour. And he's the co-host of Wrestling Club with Darren and Brett on WFMU, which is what it sounds like, a weekly talk show about pro wrestling. Something that, as Brett and I will talk about soon, we're both super into. Sadly, there's no pro wrestling on Disney+, so Brett had to pick something else for us to talk about, and he landed on Dinosaurs, the early 90s ABC sitcom from Jim Henson Productions. You know, back at that time period right after The Simpsons where every network was trying out weird animated sitcoms in primetime. This was basically ABC's stab at that, although instead of animation, it's all puppetry, people in suits, maybe some animatronics. You know, typical Henson biz. Basically imagine the Flintstones if all the people were dinosaurs and not drawn. So this show was a huge fad for maybe a year. It ran for 4 years, 4 seasons in the early 90s, but for maybe 1 year, it had like a big mainstream catchphrase that you're maybe familiar with if you were around back then. It is maybe today better known for its series finale, where if you know what happened to the dinosaurs in real life, you pretty much can guess what happened to the dinosaurs on this show. Yeah, they all die. All the dinosaurs. Not on screen, but it's probably the first kid show that ever ends with the audience having no doubt that every character is going to be dead soon. So hey, join Brett Davis and I as we talk about the first and last episodes of Dinosaurs and a whole bunch of other stuff. We kind of go off on a tangent a bit. So if you want to hear us talking about wrestling, if you want to hear us talking about other Jim Henson stuff, if you want to hear us talking about punk rock scenes from 80s movies, just go ahead and, well, do nothing, I guess, because you're already listening. Just keep on doing that. Thank you. Okay, my guest today is Brett Davis of Our Cartoon President, the new National Lampoon Radio Hour, former host of The Special Without Brett Davis. How's it going, Brett?
Good. I prefer failed host, but you know,
failed
whatever.
Host. Whatever. Why do you consider it a failure?
I don't know. It's just a fun thing to say.
Yeah. You had a good run. I mean, it was what, 3 years?
4 years, yeah.
Yeah.
I like the idea of failing at a public access show.
Right. So you did all that in New York, but now you've moved to LA. Is that correct?
Yeah, technically I'm in LA, although I really just am in my room most of the time. Things are pretty bad out here.
A poor time to move cross country. So you got to see the worst of the pandemic in New York in the spring, and now the worst of the pandemic in LA.
Yeah.
How do those two situations compare to each other in those two towns?
You know, I was in LA for the beginning of the pandemic, so I think I've seen most of the worst of it in LA. New York was like by the end of the summer, there was kind of the seeping normalcy that tricked me, because then I moved back to LA where it was way worse. So, oh well.
Yeah. So are people just not taking it seriously out there, I guess?
I don't see anybody, so they probably aren't, I would assume. But also the testing here has been messed up. It seems like a powder keg of all sorts of different things, just making this worse. But
You've
yeah,
got
it's the worst county.
that anti-vax
Yeah, there's the anti-vaxxers, there's like the rich people who think they're invincible, and like frankly are now because I'm sure they're all vaccinated. And yeah, it's just a nightmare. But I'm happy to remain in my room until it's safe to finally move to LA officially.
Yeah. Well, cool. How was it working on the new National Lampoon Radio Hour?
That was really great. Um, like it was a dream writer's room. Like everybody in there, Cole Scola, Joe Firestone, Aaron Jackson, Joe Sharp, Martin Urbano. It goes on, Lorelai Ramirez. Like just this like all-star group of people that if you know them, you get it, and if you don't know them, you probably will someday. So to kind of be in that company was just like an honor in that sense. And then, it was just you get to get paid to write to your own voice and then hear a bunch of other people doing the same. So it was like a real fun work day.
Yeah. And was that mostly like written in advance, like not a lot of improv on that?
Yeah, no real improv because they were, there was so much like sound effect work going on. But I mean, it's not like they weren't open to any like ideas you'd have in the moment. I definitely changed some stuff just before recording. So yeah, it was a really great thing. I recommend everybody check it out. Don't be scared by the National Lampoon branding.
Well, they were like consciously trying to, change the last 40 years of that brand, I think, by bringing some of y'all in.
Absolutely, yeah. And like, that original radio hour was like legendary, where SNL mined their first cast. So, that was also a cool, even though it's only in name, it was just like a cool comparison to have.
Yeah, that's how they heavily pushed it to press was, oh, hey, cover the revival of the legendary 70s show that gave all the SNL cast their starts or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if you should advertise it that way, but sure.
Had you ever written for radio before?
I mean, I've done stuff on the radio my whole life. I would call into the Best Show at in high school, and I would do stuff with Jake Fogelnest on the radio, and I've just been doing stuff with WFMU for years and years because every year they bring in some personal friend of mine, and it gives me another reason, whether it's like Joe Firestone or Dave Hill or now my co-writer for the special Darren Maybe has a show. So yeah, I am a radio guy, I guess, even though I've never really done a radio show myself.
There's not really a sort of like a public radio station out in LA comparable to FMU, is there?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's a radio station period comparable to WFMU. It's like freeform.
I guess it's unique in that it's not affiliated with a college, actually. So that's one thing that really sets WFMU apart from other stations like that.
I mean, it's just a bunch of college DJs that never grew up and continued by like luck and by circumstance and by just putting out a cool product. They remain to this day.
And so you're also a regular voice on Our Cartoon President. Is that going to continue with our new president in office?
Well, the show did a smart thing. I think the first season was just about Trump, and they continued to expand it every year to be, okay, now it's about the whole cabinet, and now it's about the whole, Washington media. It kept expanding its horizon and making Biden a bigger character once he became the clear front runner. So, and it's the same dude doing the voice of Biden that does the voice of Trump. So I think there's a good chance, but it's not up to me. It's kind of up in the air right now. So I'd like to think it'll continue. I hope so. It's definitely been a saving grace during the pandemic.
Now, your own comedy, I would say there's not a ton of politics in it, really. Like you don't really do current affairs stuff, Really? So like, how does it feel working in that area with our cartoon president?
I trust them. It seems like everybody's got the same, at least on the writing crew, is like kind of the same political leaning as me,
Yeah.
which is nice because I wasn't quite sure what the show was when I first signed on to it. It was kind of like if Trump were Fred Flintstone, and that was a weird thing to kind of grasp at first. But then once I realized, like, that may be the conceit and that may be like network mandated, but the whole show is just really great, and it skewers people of all sorts, and yeah, they're smarter people than me writing it. So
Yeah, so much of the clips that I've seen that people have shared or whatever, it's more focused on the media, it seems, actually, than any specific politician, really.
hmm yeah, which helps me because I play Anderson Cooper mainly.
Yeah. How did you? I mean, do you try to do like the Anderson Cooper voice, or are you just talking your own way?
I don't know. I guess I just have a Cooper-y timbre in my voice. Um,
Now I hear it. I didn't hear it before, but now I just, yeah, totally.
yeah, I kind of enunciate and intentionally place emphasis on words in the way he does, but I wouldn't say I have a good Anderson Cooper impression.
Are you going to get to guest host Jeopardy too, then, like he is?
I didn't know. Oh gosh, that's exciting. Good for
Yeah.
him. I'm sure that's a dream come
He's
true
on
for
a
him.
long list of people, including Dr. Oz, another one of the guest hosts.
Well, that one's not so fun.
I think people are protesting over that. So you said Trump is kind of like a Fred Flintstone type in our cartoon president. Now that's kind of like the show we're talking about today. You picked Dinosaurs, the old ABC sitcom from the early '90s, made by Jim Henson Productions. What made you? Which is, again, sort of one of those shows like the Flintstones, very self-consciously like the Flintstones or the Honeymooners. What made you want to pick Dinosaurs?
I don't know. It popped up. It's a weird pop culture anomaly where there was a good 10-year span where everybody was kind of open to having puppets in prime time, or maybe 20 years if you count the Muppet Show. But yeah,
Yeah.
Alf was a big hit. I remember being a kid and watching Dinosaurs. The production is like really amazing, so I kind of wanted to
Yeah.
revisit it.
That's the best thing about it is the character designs, all the animatronics and all the puppetry and everything. They do a fantastic job, as expected from the Henson people.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how good it is, at least animatronic wise.
Yeah. So did you watch it regularly as a kid?
I did watch it. I can't say if it was regularly or not. It seems like a thing that I was just like a TV kid, and I didn't have cable, so it was just whatever was on network television, whether it was an infomercial or a syndicated sitcom or whatever. There's a good chance I was watching it if it was on TV in the early '90s or mid '90s. So yeah, I think I watched it. I didn't have any clear, like, distinctive memories about it besides, like, I knew the baby, I knew he had a catchphrase. I didn't remember any of the voice actors in it.
Yeah.
Which that was like the big surprise for this one.
I remembered Sherman Hemsley, and that was it. And I thought he was maybe Earl. I forgot he was the boss. I don't know how I forgot Stuart Pankin was Earl from Not Necessarily the News.
Yeah.
And so many ads over the years.
I mean, I guess I missed the Not Necessarily the News peak, but is that a bigger show than Dinosaurs? It seems like Dinosaurs, he should be known for Dinosaurs.
He should be, yes, but it's his voice, so you don't really, on Not Necessarily the News, he was like the main anchor, and they all used their own names. So if you were old enough to watch HBO in the mid '80s, you're probably going to remember him more from that than Dinosaurs.
Yeah, if anything, I think I knew him from like he was on the Honey I Shrunk the Kids TV show.
Oh yes.
So that's what I remembered him from mainly.
Yeah, he does a perfectly fine job as Earl Sinclair. All the dinosaurs' names are after oil companies, which is a goofy joke.
I did not pick that up, but yeah, that adds up.
All the old names are former oil companies, which Sinclair, they actually had a dinosaur as their logo back when they were still pumping gas. Um, so we decided to watch, this is a 4-season show. We didn't watch every episode for this dumb podcast. We just picked the first episode and the very last episode, which has become one of the more infamous series finales in the history of TV. So let's start talking about that first episode. What really stood out to you about it, watching it for, I assume, the first time in 30 years?
Well, there's a Henson thing where, the quality tends to hold up a lot better than you might think it would.
Yeah.
Just like you watch the Muppet shows as like an adult and you're like, oh, this is like legitimately funny and seems like it was made by cool people. I did not have that feeling with Dinosaurs. It felt like I was maybe watching Home Improvement or something. They did, the comedy was very broad. It felt like the Simpsons episode where like Maggie is born. It's just like it. I didn't like it, and I really wanted to, so it was a little disappointing. Also,
I
a very
think part of the problem
episode, like visually. I noticed in later seasons they added a lot more light to it.
Yeah, no, I think they did. It is, the first one they didn't have. Well, it's a pilot, so they don't have everything down. They didn't really have the visual style of the show down perfectly yet. When you're talking about it not aging as well as other Henson projects, I think it's because they went and got sitcom guys to create this. Like the two co-creators listed, like the head writers on it, they were guys not from the Muppet shows or the Henson system. They came from like Who's the Boss and Boy Meets World and shows like that. And so they're definitely writing that type of language that they already know very well, which is, that sort of stilted, very artificial, kind of dated sitcom that was very prevalent back then.
Yeah, I immediately recognized Michael Jacobs from Boy Meets World, which was a similar show that was like played with the format and was smarter than its contemporaries, but also not like great either. Yeah. So it seemed to kind of fall in that. Yeah.
Like my wife watched these with me and she was wondering if it was supposed to be a bad sitcom or if it was trying to make fun of bad sitcoms. And I was like, I don't think it's that ironic. This is an early 90s kids show, basically. They're definitely trying to like mock the form a bit by replacing humans with dinosaurs, but I don't think they're actually trying to really satirize sitcoms too much.
Yeah, the gags that were kind of like Flintstone-y, like live animals in the fridge and stuff like that. Like those did not land with me at all. I was just like, is this going to be the whole show?
Yeah.
So
are you a vegetarian or a vegan?
Oh no, I just I like good comedy.
Right. At least they incorporated that into like the plot twist at the end with the dinner becoming the new boss, like the new assistant to the boss or whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's for a show of its time. It seemed to have a real political agenda, which I really respected and admired. And I'm sure if I was watching these, it subconsciously affected me in ways that like The Simpsons did and stuff as a little kid.
Yeah, even that first episode has the environmental message at the end.
Yeah.
With the dinner, the mammal that was Earl's food depressed over how his home in the forest was destroyed.
Yeah. And this moment where he is about to like bite his head off or something did have like some real dramatic stakes to it. Like, it was just like a close up of like a shivering puppet.
Yeah.
Like
the mammal
ready to
wanted
accept.
It.
Yeah. He was like ready to accept like death.
Telling Earl to bite his head off because his family was gone. And then the next day he has a job. And I guess that made up for losing his family, was just becoming a cog in the capitalist machine.
Yeah. If anything, it's a cautionary tale. But yeah, that stuff is cool. And that kind of won me over in the end. I was like, all right, if like this show has that. Obviously the next episode we watched was way more leaning into that world.
Yes. Before we get to that though, I did like how the pilot, the very second joke was about wrestling. That's a good start to a show right there.
Yeah, I think we're both wrestling fans, for better or worse. So that was a nice
Yes.
little nod.
It's also interesting because, the early 90s, that's longer ago than I want it to be, but it's still relatively recent.
Hmm.
And yet from that era, you still have a lot of sitcoms, and this show is one of them that still has that sort of old school single career family model where the women are filling traditional housewife roles while the men, even in this situation, Earl, doing low paying blue collar work, and yet they're able to survive on that. And that already feels kind of dated even for 1991, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Roseanne was the first, right, to have like the true blue collar lifestyle represented.
That I can
So
think of, the first really prominent one. And that
yeah,
was a couple years before this.
yeah. I mean, I guess like honeymooners and stuff all had a version of that, but this is like a true like Joe Sixpack type dad. So I mean, maybe I guess that was a little more current, just because he was a construction worker.
You mentioned before we did the call, you mentioned the similarities between the show and the Honeymooners. Why do you think that show has had such a massive impact, like a lasting, like decades later impact on the sitcom? Just because it was one of the very first ones?
Yeah. Well, you had said like the last episode is about civilization ending, and I was like, oh yeah, it's an old honeymooners episode.
Oh, okay, that was a joke. I didn't
Yeah,
think that was about that specific thing. All right.
yeah, it's the one where like they're just like bracing each other for the oncoming apocalypse. Uh, yeah, honeymooners is great. I mean, I've been watching a lot of I Love Lucy lately too, and they hold up, and honeymooners a little less so, but it's still just like you know, they're doing a little play in 25
Yeah.
minutes, and with very clear characters, and I Love Lucy and Honeymooners are practically identical. It's like two couples and bounce off of each other and stuff. Um, I think it's just kind of like a universal formula. And if you like, Everybody Loves Raymond was as much of like a 50s sitcom, I think, as the ones of their era, because they had those like long drawn out, set scenes, like they take
Mhm.
place all in the kitchen, for the most part, and it was a formula that worked and connected with people. So I think you know it's not necessarily the jokes. I think I Love Lucy is super funny, um, but that's because Lucille Ball is like a great performer. Obviously,
Yeah.
Jackie Gleason is like such a fun person to watch. So I think that's really all you need for a successful sitcom, which is maybe why Dinosaurs was lacking, because there was no real like personality. It was just these puppets.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
all very stock characters too. Like there wasn't really anything unique about any of the family.
Yeah. Like the kids, I were nothing to me.
Yeah.
And the
Um,
baby, oh my, the baby's so annoying.
it's really annoying. It never shuts up.
Yeah.
If it
Like
just said
that.
like the one line, maybe it'd be okay. But no, it just
Yeah. The baby was like, reminded me of Stewie or something. It's just like, get this thing out of here.
I don't know if you saw it was performed by Kevin Clash, who was the
Yeah.
guy who did Elmo forever. So it has a very strong Elmo component of just sort of being very annoying.
By strong Elmo component, do you mean that he does the same exact voice?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it was annoying. I could do without the baby. And when the baby was like being born, I was like kind of dreading it.
yeah.
I was like, oh
As
God, here
a
it comes.
as a writer and a comedian, do you think it's I don't know, is it important or is there value in and people who are starting off today still going back and watching shows like Honeymooners and I Love Lucy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just like, to break the rules, you need to know the rules, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think WandaVision right now is giving everybody like an education and maybe a refresher, in just like old sitcom tropes and formats and stuff. I think they're doing a really good job at kind of nailing the tone of each one, which is a
Yeah.
hard thing to do. like after the fact, but I've heard other people say like, oh, this is making me like go back and watch Dick Van Dyke or something, or I Dream of Jeannie, like, and that's cool.
Yeah.
I grew up watching those things because, again, I would watch whatever was on TV.
It's a little it's a bit of a bummer how hard it can be to find those old shows. I mean,
Yeah.
streaming somewhere, but like I don't know where to find Bewitched right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't know where to find Bewitched. Was never a huge fan of that one. I Love Lucy is on Hulu, and like I think CBS has it too. And I was trying to tell somebody how like cool I Love Lucy is, and the first episode that's available at least is like called Lucy Thinks Ricky is Trying to Murder Her. That's the first one. So I'm like, don't you want to watch that show?
I was going to say earlier that between I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners, Lucy didn't have nearly as much domestic abuse, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah, it was more insidious. They were slowly trying to murder each other by poisoning each other's food and stuff. Yeah, Honeymooners with the oh, Alice, one of these days. Everybody talks about it, but it is like a little.
Yeah, it did not age well. And to their credit, shows like Dinosaurs and The Simpsons that owe something to Ralph Cramden. They never really replicated that part of the character, which was smart.
Yeah, although Homer did strangle his son every episode for a few seasons.
That is true. Yeah. Honeymooners never had kids. I don't know if it's because they just didn't want to drag down the cast with too many actors, or if they didn't trust kid actors to do well back in the early 50s. But of all these shows, they always have families, and the Honeymooners, they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to move out of their, studio apartment, I think.
Yeah.
But Lucy had kids. Or whatever. She had little Ricky, who was annoying.
Yeah. That was a huge thing at the time. First time I think someone on TV had a kid.
Yeah. And they moved into a house and stuff too.
They allowed them to grow. You don't see that a lot, even in sitcoms today.
Yeah, I respect that. It's nice to see.
So the second episode of Dinosaurs that we watched, talking about, death of sitcom characters. This is the last episode they made, although it aired in the middle of the final season. I guess ABC probably didn't want kids to just think that all of these dinosaurs just died and that was the end of the show. The episode's called Changing Nature. It's the 7th episode of the 4th season. Now, this thing is really infamous, notorious on the internet. Had you watched it recently before we did this for the show?
Yeah, I hadn't watched it, but I knew the lore of it. So I knew what I was going into.
Yeah. Yeah, it became like an internet meme a few years ago. I think especially when it went up on Hulu after not being available anywhere legally for a while. But so yeah, this episode, it ends with basically them causing the Ice Age and the knowledge that they're all going to freeze and or starve to death. What did you think of this, watching it today?
Again, I didn't find any of it funny or necessarily endearing, but I thought it was a well-written episode of TV. That had a pretty good message. It really hit you over the head with it. But for a show that's like mainly meant for families with like little kids, I think that's respectable and always cool to see.
So you didn't find a horny bug sexually harassing a teenage dinosaur to be funny?
Yeah, that one was a little much.
Yeah, I don't think that would be written the same way today.
Yeah. She just kind of like puts up with it, but yeah. I do like the idea of a horny bug. I'm like, I think that's a funny thing. He's got nobody to mate with, so yeah, he's gonna be a little hornball.
Yeah, that's a terrible fate to be consigned to. Yeah. So this like sort of environmental message, I feel like that was something. It was fairly common back in the day. I mean, never to this extent, I think. Like, you had Captain Planet. You had all those movies that were about, like the evil business going to, like, tear up something that was going to ruin the environment. And it didn't do anything. What the hell happened? Like, why are we 30 years later still facing, like, the same damn catastrophes, but at an even worse level than we were 30 years ago?
Well, I mean, I certainly cut my 6-pack containers I cut
Yeah.
those up. Yeah, the big one for me as a kid was Widget the World Watcher, which I've since learned is not like a universal thing that every other kid watched. It was like
I've
an
never heard of it.
Australian show about an alien that comes to Earth to like save the planet.
Did you grow up in Australia? How do you know about this thing?
I think I would just get like videos, like those like cheapo $3 videos at, Rite Aid or whatever.
Yeah.
And they from like Family Home Entertainment, and they were just like pushing out whatever they had in their archives. So yeah, I got this weird Australian show.
So you've probably seen all those animated films that are like the Aladdin ripoff that's not the Disney Aladdin, or like the Little Mermaid that's like you could buy it for $1, like at the Walmart bins,
I
right?
think I think those after like my first like Alibaba movie, I became savvy to it, and I was like, this isn't what I want. But yeah, I did watch a lot of like off-brand cartoons and weird classic, blurry Fleischer Superman cartoons and Betty Boops and stuff. So yeah, I
The,
had a big appetite for all of that as a kid.
even in shoddily made VHS tapes, those Fleischer cartoons still look pretty amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. They sound like they're somebody's like playing it through a telephone, but yeah, they were great.
So this Dinosaurs finale, it's a really heavy-handed satire of industrialism and capitalism and how it impacts the environment. Do you think it could have been salvaged to make it sort of as effective emotionally, but also funnier and less beating you over the head with its message?
I think, for the story, they were kind of, I'm not judging on seeing the whole series. If this is their parting message to the world, I think it should be maybe heavy-handed and
Yeah.
kind of obnoxiously like, see what we're saying here? Like the dinosaurs aren't going to go extinct. Like, you know, I don't mind heavy-handedness when the message is good and it's for like kids. I did like the detail that the factory that ruined the ecosystem was a wax fruit factory.
Right. It doesn't
Like
grow on
that,
trees. So,
yeah, that is a really funny bit. I gotta admit.
and I liked, because I feel like that this angle of the environmental message hadn't really been fully formed yet by 1991 or 94 when this episode was made. But Earl specifically blames his generation for the environmental catastrophe.
Yeah,
Which, the whole boomers destroyed everything thing, I didn't really start hearing that regularly until like the aughts or something like that. So they were a little bit early, I think, on the anti-baby boomer tip.
yeah. I mean, I think that was guilt tripping their target audience a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe consider recycling, you wasteful pigs. But yeah, that's yeah. Again, I don't mind that heavy-handedness with like, well, we destroyed your world. I don't know what your future is going to be like. When I'm doing my impression of Earl, that's his name, right?
Yes.
The dad. I am doing exaggerated eyebrows and like moving my head like it's
Right.
like it's on a
And
swivel.
you're wearing a shirt with no pants as well. So
Yeah, wearing a shirt with no pants.
if you had seen this as a kid, I don't know how old you would have been in 1994, but if you saw this when it aired that summer, how do you think you would have reacted to it?
I mean, it definitely would have affected me. I think like 94, I was about 5 or 6. So I was starting to have, memories. um, like I think back, like I was traumatized by Heaven's Gate is
Oh,
a good
yeah.
good way to put it. Like that, I had that dude's like eyes seared into my brain. So I think like an environmental message, like if you don't, take care of the planet, you will all die in a like in a snowstorm, would stick with me. So I don't think I saw this episode particularly, but yeah, I think I would have been scared, and I bought into the Captain Planet stuff, and I tried to be an eco-conscious child as much as one can be.
Yeah.
Planting trees and stuff.
where I work at Paste, our office in downtown Atlanta was right next door to the Captain Planet Foundation.
Oh wow. Did you see
Yeah.
him? Did you meet him?
Um, Sadly, I never saw the captain or Ted Turner, who that was where his offices were at the time. So,
Okay.
yeah. Have you seen the Heaven's Gate docuseries that came out earlier this year or late last year?
I'm not like the biggest like true crime documentary person, so I don't like naturally take that stuff in, and
Yeah.
I thought I had kind of grown out of my trauma of it, but when I got all the targeted ads for it on every social media site, so I'd be like clicking through my Instagram stories, and then I'd see that guy, and I'd be like, ah, because he traumatized me as a child. I thought that you know this dude was going to
There's
come to my house and take me in a spaceship and leave a corpse for my mom to find. It was like my mom watched a lot of like 2020 and stuff with me in the
yeah.
room, a lot of America's Most Wanted. So I kind of lived in fear a little bit as a little kid.
Something that deep and foundational you don't ever really get over. Like I'm a little bit older than you, and I grew up at the peak of like the '80s satanic panic, and I was
Hmm.
always frightened to death that I was going to have a bad stray thought and immediately sell my soul to the devil for the rest of my existence. And even
Yeah,
today, like whenever I see like any of that '80s era like anti-Satanism stuff, it's a little hard for me to take in. I can't really devil stuff kind of messes me up still.
that's fair. Yeah, but by the time I think I was by my generation, I think Devil was cool. So I always
Yeah,
associated with him with like a he's like a cool guy.
yeah, he's a buddy. You want to hang out with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but also maybe that stuff just didn't take for me also.
All right, man. So, any final thoughts on dinosaurs and or the oncoming apocalypse that will consume us all?
Well, I did have a little Twitter thread yesterday that did tie into dinosaurs. I was looking at the movie The Big Beach, which is the
Okay.
1987 Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello movie.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's I would check back on it because it's a weird movie. Like they go back to the beach and they try to relive their youth, but like it's the 80s beach now. So like there's like a fishbone musical sequence. Pee Wee Herman has like sings like Surfin' Bird.
Hmm.
OJ Simpson's in it. Like it's just this weird mishmash of like 60s and 80s stuff. And like there are like 80s movie punks in it. And there was a song in it that I was like, I wonder what song that is. Because it wasn't on the soundtrack, which was all like,
I
Till
read this thread.
Tuesday.
I'm
Okay.
remembering now that I read your entire thread. Yeah, no, that's
I
amazing. The
I
fact you tracked that
apologize.
song down.
I apologize that this is but it's just a thing I'm excited about. But yeah, I found the
Yeah.
song and it's the same song that the movie punk in Star Trek 4 is listening to. And the guy that plays the punk actually recorded it for the movie because he thought they were going to use a song that wouldn't have been appropriate, like a new wave song or something.
Yeah.
And I then did a deep dive on that guy who like retweeted it and replied to the thread. But
Awesome.
he was a Muppeteer who had worked on Dinosaurs and Return of the Jedi, and also his character from Star Trek 4, the bus punk with a boombox, reappears in Spider-Man: Homecoming. So
Wow.
that was my little, map with a red string I did yesterday.
No, I love when crap like that comes together, all these like weird coincidences that can just coil around one another. Um, like this is similar thing. So, I went to college in Athens, Georgia, and I
Hmm.
learned yesterday about this infamous murder there in the late 70s when the owner of one bar hired a hitman to kill the owner of the bar next door to him. And I saw that there was an Unsolved Mysteries episode, speaking of shows that scared me as a kid,
Oh yeah,
about it
that's a
in
big one.
19 yeah, they had an episode about it in 1989. And so this afternoon, I was like, hey, I'm going to watch this. I pulled it up on YouTube. And that same Unsolved Mysteries episode had a segment about a woman named Liz Carmichael, who in the 70s supposedly invented this three-wheel car that could get 70 miles to the gallon at the height of the gas crisis. And it turned out to be a scam and a con. And the thing is, Liz Carmichael, there's currently right now airing on HBO a 4 episode true crime docuseries about that woman that I started watching this week. So it's like I start watching this one show. 2 days later, I decide to watch an old show because it had a murder in my old hometown and it somehow talks about the same thing.
Wow.
Coincidences.
Yeah, it's yeah. If you know of a grisly murder and it's not optioned yet, get
Yeah.
get yourself some meeting time with Netflix or HBO.
Do you think maybe the history of movie punk scenes could be the next true crime
Oh man,
docuseries
I
fad?
would. I'm sure there were crimes, but yeah, I would love to see that. Uh, get Lloyd Kaufman in there.
Yeah.
Get what's her name? Penelope Spheris. All those people that just yeah, I love '80s movie punks
Yeah.
because they're just this like villain meant to scare like a normal person, and they
Have you
always have
seen?
like
Go
way
ahead,
more
sir.
style than any punk you've ever seen in real life.
Yeah. I just watched this last night. Have you seen Smithereens?
I have not.
It's 82, 83. It's by Susan Seidelman, who went on to do Desperately Seeking Susan. And it's totally about like the early 80s New York punk scene. Richard Hell was one of the main characters, and how by the early 80s it was just depleted and people were like leaving for LA, and it was all about business and like getting signed and not actually like about the art anymore. And it's a good movie. It's on HBO Max. If you have
Oh,
that, you might want to check it out.
I will absolutely check it out. My
It's
my my good punk movie discovery was Suburbia, which is
yes.
it's Penelope Spheris's first movie, I think, before
Yeah.
the decline, or maybe after Decline One, which is also good, and
I think it was her
Waynesburg
first
eventually.
like theater or dramatic film, not non-documentary.
Yeah, uh, and it's a fun watch.
A lot of child death in that one.
A lot of well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't say it's a fun watch.
And it definitely does not flinch from showing the insane sexism in the punk scene at the time, which I don't even know if that's what Spheris was trying to go for, but there's just some scenes that are deeply uncomfortable to watch today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I take it back. It's not a fun watch, but it's an interesting watch.
It's fun from a cultural anthropological perspective of seeing that sort of era and lifestyle on film, you know?
Mhm.
And the
Absolutely, yeah.
music is pretty good.
Music's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Smithereens, the music's all by Glenn Mercer and the Feelies, and it's good stuff.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, we kind of way got off the track. Maybe I'll edit this stuff out, but one last thing to talk about before I let you go. Dinosaurs seems to fit into this track record that the Jim Henson Company has, where when they try to do non-Muppet stuff or stuff that's maybe I don't want to say more for adults because this show is definitely not for adults, but has more of an adult message to it that they tend to not do very well. You know?
Yeah, I do have
Like,
a stronger memory of Muppets Tonight, which I think was around the same era.
yes, that was like
Yeah.
the sort of the talk show that Henson himself hosted, right?
I think this is after his death, but it's like a late night talk show. It's like cool.
I think I'm thinking of Jim Henson Presents or whatever from like
Yeah.
1989. The last show that he hosted is what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a
So
few years
Muppets.
later. It's very
Yeah.
90s. I think it's like their answer to like the Larry Sanders Show.
Okay. Is that the one when they introduced the reggae squid character?
I believe so. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I have not revisited that though, so these are
I
all like
wonder if
vague
that'll
memories.
wonder if that'll make it on to Disney Plus at some point.
Maybe with one of those content warnings they have to throw up.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it got me thinking about Dinosaurs. Got me thinking about that movie they made a few years ago, the R-rated movie with Melissa McCarthy. That was just embarrassing. And
Oh yeah.
what was that called? The Happy Time Murders, I think.
Hmm.
And what was that? The SNL stuff they did the first year of SNL. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, nobody likes those.
Yeah, they're really bad. It's like them trying to do like weird like stoner underground humor, and it's very poorly done. And the SNL people hated it, I think, right?
Yeah, and if you read the Live from New York book, it's just like there's pages and pages of them complaining, like, "Oh, my
Yeah.
sketch got cut because they had to play this Muppets thing."
That book is crazy because they kind of talk the same way about those Al Brooks films, and those films are actually hilarious today.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking screen time, but yeah, those hold up. Albert Brooks in general holds up in a
Yeah.
big way.
That YouTube clip of him doing the ventriloquism act that I see people tweet every so often, that is
Uh,
brilliant.
it's so ahead of its time, and it's the thing I return to all the time. Just like when he drops the dummy to smoke
Yeah.
a cigarette, and it's like just a masterclass in like timing and subverting expectations. And to think it's like happening on like what show is it on? It was like
Mike Douglas
some
or something. I don't even know.
yeah, it was
Merv
some like
Griffin.
cheesy variety show or talk show, and he's doing this very postmodern bit.
Like even by today's standards, it's still very cutting edge, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, man, I wish I'd thought of this because
All
people
right.
would say it's still cutting edge today. Yeah.
Brett Davis, thanks for stopping by talking about dinosaurs. I guess next week we'll be launching our new podcast where you and I talk about punk scenes from 80s movies, starting
I'm,
with
I'm
Star Trek 4.
oh, I'm down for it. Yeah, and thank you for asking me. I'm a big fan of your writing on Paste, and
Oh,
we,
thank you.
we seem to we seem to orbit the same niche interests. So it's
Yeah.
nice talking about dinosaurs with you.
Where can people find you online?
You can check me out at Brett Davis RIP on any of your Twitter or Instagram, or brettdavis.rip to see all my stuff I've made before the pandemic when I've retired. And check out, I do a wrestling radio show now for WFMU called Wrestling Club. So that's my
I had
new
no idea.
project.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on sometime.
That'd be great. What did you think of the Kenta run in at the end of Dynamite on Wednesday?
I loved it. The Forbidden Door, it's opening. So that's exciting.
Yeah, can't wait to see where they go from here. So
Yeah.
hey, thanks for listening, and thanks to Brett Davis for coming on to the show. Thanks to the dinosaurs for existing long before us and leaving us their remains for us to ensure our own environmental destruction. And thanks to the Jim Henson Productions company for making a sitcom about them several millions of years later. Dozens, even. This has been What the Plus. It'll be back next week with me and probably a guest. And we're going to talk about something, and it's going to be something you're going to want to listen to. I'm pretty sure of it. Maybe. I mean, you probably don't want to listen to it. If you've ever made it to the end of one of these episodes, then presumably it's something that you actually find yourself enjoying. So keep it up. I'll be keeping it up on my end. So you just go ahead and you keep it up on your end too. I think that's a pretty good bargain, eh? Have a great week, everybody.